fancy, imagination, intent, will. So you're constantly planning, scheming, desiring, wishing, and you're full of fanciful notions and imagination about all kinds of things, and this is called sankalpa. Now you might say, what's wrong with sankalpa? What's wrong with that is by providing an object of desire, you're not extinguishing desire, you are only adding fuel to the fire. So what you're in effect doing is creating more desires. And the more desires that are created within your system, the greater the chances that that desire will be unfulfilled in your system. And unfulfilled desire is a weapon of mass distraction and mass destruction. So all you need to do is understand what you have. So how do you deal with sankalpa? First thing is, use your intellect to control, discipline this thought flow. The mind churns out thoughts at an amazing rate. And if your intellect is not sharp enough, is not strong enough to be aware of the kind of thoughts that you're entertaining, to nip some thoughts in the bud which are not in your interest, and to promote other thoughts which need to be promoted, then you end up in a desperate situation. So the first step is control your thoughts, control this sankalpa, discipline it. The next step is to grow to a higher level of desire. Just as all of us at some point in our lives were children and we were enamored with toy things, playthings. Today, you're not enamored with playthings. Why? Because you've grown out of that obsession with playthings and you've picked up higher desires which have the potential to fulfill you much more quantitatively and qualitatively. Isn't that so? So you moved up the ladder. Similarly now, whatever sankalpas, whatever desires you're caught up with, stretch your imagination to pick up a higher desire. The moment you pick up the higher desire, this temptation, the hold that the lower desire has over you will wane, fade. Ultimately, the only way of dealing with desire is to understand your fullness. Understand that you're sitting on a gold mine. You are, even now, as you're full of desires, you're completely, totally fulfilled. When you understand that, at least when you embark on a program of understanding your fullness, to that extent, this desire loses its grip over you. So, when he says one cannot become a yogi without renouncing sankalpa, how do you renounce sankalpa? First, use your intellect to control it, discipline it. Second, grow to a higher desire. Third, most important, understand your fullness. Then your approach to the world will be very different. It will not be slavish, it will not be subservient. Your approach to the world will be like that of a master, because you're not dependent on it. Third,
आरुरुक्षोर्मुनेर्योगं कर्म कारणमुच्यते योगारूढस्य तस्यैव शमः कारणमुच्यते.
karma, path of action, is said to be the means for a muni, seeker of truth, wishing to master yoga. Serenity is said to be the means for one rooted in yoga. So here again he is giving the difference between a yogi and a sannyasi. A yogi is one who needs to be on the path of action, karma. A sannyasi is one who needs to follow the path of knowledge. So why is he giving two distinct paths? He's giving two distinct paths because then you need to come back and understand what is happening within each one of us. In our interactions with the world, in our life itself, what is happening? What's happening is there are three basic transactions that are taking place. The world, stimuli from the world enter your system through your sense organs, and that is called receipts. You see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and all of this becomes one integrated picture in your mind, and at the level of your mind and intellect, there is a reaction that takes place between the stimulus that has entered and the desire that you have in your mind. Arising out of this reaction, you respond back into the world through the organs of action. This is what is happening day in and day out right through our lives. It may have happened this morning. This morning when you picked up the newspaper, right? All of us may have read the same newspaper. You turn one page, what do you read? Bhagavad Gita lecture, Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. Okay? When you read that, obviously you have a desire for it. So when it entered your system, there's a reaction that's taking place between the desire for Bhagavad Gita and the ad, what you have read about it. And out of that reaction comes the response, you have come here. Turn next page, what do you read? Ad for Scorpio. Full page ad. No desire in you. So obviously, I'm confidently saying that because you haven't gone there to the dealer. There is no reaction, no response. Turn one more page. You read Fahrenheit 9/11, the movie. Somebody else in your family suddenly starts getting active. Oh, where is it going on? What is the time? What time is the show? This, that, and the other. Before you know it, tickets are bought, the person is gone. Turn one more page, you read test match in Nagpur. Your son has a passion for cricket. Suddenly says, I want to go to Nagpur to watch the test match. So, the stimulus being the same, the newspaper is the same, the ads in the newspaper are the same. So what enters you is the same, but the reaction and the response that is taking place in different people is different because of the desires in you. Okay? Now, there are basically two types of people. One who have a lot of desires. So such a person, when he reads the newspaper, every page that he turns, he has some desire. So he's reacting constantly to all the stimuli and he's responding. So such a person tends to be very active because he's responding all the time to all the receipts that come. At the other end of the spectrum is a person with very few desires. That person with very few desires, what happens? The same stimuli reach him. You can't stop that. Especially in Mumbai. You have Navaratri noise going on, Ganesh Chaturthi noise going on, stimuli that enter you, you can't stop. But because the person doesn't have desires, it ends there. The stimulus enters the system and it leads to its natural death. Nothing happens. There's no reaction. And because there's no reaction, or very few reactions, there are very few responses. Such a person tends to be contemplative by nature. Okay? So these are the two kinds of people. If these two people want to become spiritual, what must they do? They must convert whatever it is that they're already engaged in into worship. So a karma yogi, a person who has many desires, a yogi who has many desires and therefore is responding a lot. He tends to be active. What must he do? He must convert his actions into worship. A yogi must perform karma yoga. he has to convert responses to worship. The other person, the sannyasi, he needs to do jnana yoga because he is not acting, he is not responding, he is not reacting. The only thing that is happening within his system is stimuli enter him, and therefore he needs to convert receipts to worship. This concept is put across so beautifully in the Ishavasya Upanishad. The very first two mantras, he speaks of the two different types of people. One, the contemplative, second, the active. And in the first mantra, Ishavasya midagum sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha magrudhakasya svidhanam. So what he's saying is, a person, a sannyasi, a person with very few desires, who's not responding much to the stimuli that enter him, he tends to look at the world and understand that all this is Isha, all this is the Lord, all this is Brahman. Contemplative person does jnana yoga and reaches the state of realization. What happens if you're not able to do this? See, the general active person around, if you say sit down and contemplate, he'll say, what do I contemplate upon? The only thing he knows how to contemplate upon is stock market and what else? What is the entertainment in the city? So he can't do that. So what will he do? Mantra 2. Neveha karmani jijivishe chatagun samaha evam tvainanyatetosti na karma lipyate nare. He puts this beautifully. He says, for such a person, by performing action for 100 years, shatam samaha, you'll reach the same state that a sannyasi is reaching. And then he gives the confidence, the reassurance. He says, karma na lipyate. Action will not taint you. What kind of action is he talking about? He's talking about selfless action, nishkama karma. Actions not propelled by desire. So if you want to convert or to become spiritual, you have to first understand which category do I belong to. Do I belong to the active category? Do I belong to the contemplative category? Whichever category you belong to, there is a method, there is a pathway to that state of perfection. This is what you need to understand. In Vedanta, in the Indian system, not a single individual is left or disqualified. There is a path for every single person. You only have to, what do you call that? Mix and match. Match the pathway to your personality and you're well on your way to realization. Next verse.
Yada hinendriyartheshu na karma svanusajjate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudhastadochyate.
One has mastered yoga when renouncing all sankalpas, desires. One is not attached to sense objects or actions. So there are basically two conditions. The two conditions to mastering yoga are, number one, such a person is not attached to sense objects, which means receipts, which we spoke of in the earlier verse, or actions, responses. And he has renounced all sankalpas, means reactions, desires. So, the two conditions are, you should not be attached to sense objects. He doesn't say you should not have sense objects. He says you should not be attached to the sense object. There is a world of difference between the two. What is the difference? When you have a sense object without attachment, then You use the sense object for your welfare, for your benefit. When you have a sense object and you're attached to it, then you hand over mastery of your personality to that sense object. Recently in some committee, high-level committee, these committee members, when there are high-level committees, the committee members squabble and fight among themselves. So this was going on, and one philosophical person, one of the members was boasting. He says, my grandfather was roaming around in a Rolls Royce and a Bentley and this, that and the other. So this other committee member told him, yeah, I know, and I can see the ill effects of that Rolls Royce and Bentley on me. This is what happens. You get attached to objects, the objects go, but the ill effects of that attachment remains with you, and that is what hits you. So therefore he says, have the sense objects. You have as many Rolls Royces as Bentleys as you can. But never don't get attached to it, because it's this attachment, this excessive value that you have for it that ruins the human being. And that's the tragedy. So, sense objects don't get attached to them. How can you not get attached to sense objects when you understand things of greater value, when you move up the ladder from physical things to emotional joys, to intellectual aspirations? Then you understand that the physical things are not worth getting attached to. Then you don't get attached to actions. See, as long as you're attached to sense objects, then you must work to obtain the objects that you are attached to. And the third is Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. Renounced all sankalpas, renounced all desires. How do you end up renouncing desires? When you understand that you get what you deserve, not what you desire. When you are convinced of this, then you understand it is futile desiring things unless you deserve them. So your attention shifts from merely sitting and desiring to a dynamic, powerful state where you are working in such a way that you deserve the best. Then it has to come to you. It automatically comes to you, unasked for, without having to chase after it. And it's such a fabulous experience. This is what is called serendipitous experiences. You're working for a higher cause, you're working for a higher ideal, you're doing your best for something higher, and the lower automatically comes to you. And that's a very, very happy state to be in. Instead, we are in a state where we're chasing after sense objects. And in this chase, we find that the demand, the desires far outstrip your income. And then what do? Loans, credit card, this, that and the other. And you further burden yourself with more stress and more tension. Instead, if only you learnt this art of working on deserving the best, then it has to come to you. There's no way that it will not come. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to, whether the markets go up or down, whether the economy goes up or down, or whatever happens in the environment. If you deserve a thing, by God, you'll get it. So let's move, let's shift from desiring to deserving. And then you sail through life, get the best that the world has to offer, without stress, without tension, without having to spend sleepless nights worrying and getting anxious over it. So that's why he's saying, Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi. Such a person is yoga rudha, rooted in yoga, established in yoga, one who has mastered yoga. Next verse.
Uddharedātmanātmānam Nātmānamavasādayet Ātmaiva yātmano bandhuhu Ātmaiva ripurātmanaha.
One should redeem oneself by oneself, lift oneself by oneself. One should not lower oneself. The self alone is one's ally. The self alone is one's adversary. Mind you, Krishna is talking to his dear friend Arjuna, who is in a critical condition, who is about to enter a battle and he finds himself completely incapacitated. This is a major issue. And Krishna is a self-realized soul, not just self-realized, he was realized at birth, avatar. Such a person is telling Arjuna, Uddhared Atmanatmanam, lift yourself by yourself. In other words, he is telling him, take responsibility for yourself. Don't pass the buck on to me, because however much I want to help you, and I do want to help you, it is not possible for me to do it. And yet, there are those of us, you see, there is this human tendency to try and dodge hard work, dodge effort. So you say, oh, who wants to go through all these laborious 18 chapters of the Gita? Let me go find one person who will put his hand on me and bless me, and I'll be over and done. All good things will happen to me. Or now the latest is, change the spelling of your name and all good things will happen. Weird things. Any avenue not to make effort yourself is what we're looking for. And yet emphatically he says, only you can help yourself and only you can destroy yourself. Nobody else can do it. We have three equipments, the body, mind and intellect. If you use the body to perform selfish activity, then that entity becomes your adversary, becomes inimical, becomes your enemy, because the body then destroys you. The same body you use for yajna activity, sacrificial, selfless activity, and you will be blessed with all goodness. So that self becomes an ally. The mind, entertain hateful thoughts or entertain attachment, which is another form of hatred, and you will be visited with sorrow and suffering. Same mind, you turn it towards the higher, entertain feelings of bhakti, of love, of oneness, and you find you'll be blessed. Intellect, as long as it is planning and scheming and maneuvering and manipulating in the world, and this all of us are doing constantly, incessantly, you will only end up with agitation and stress. Same intellect, turn its direction to wade through the impermanent factors of life and zero in, or at least look for what is permanent, and you will get happiness right through your life. So that's what he's saying. So take responsibility for yourself. Don't pass the buck on anybody else. It's certainly not a guru, certainly not a deity, certainly not, and nobody in the world can help you, for the simple reason, if Krishna could not help Arjuna, there is nobody in the world who can help. But very emphatically he says, you can help yourself. And why don't you try that? You've been trying all kinds of things and it hasn't worked. At least out of desperation, try this. Try self-help and it'll work. So Shakespeare said that in a beautiful way. He says, making a famine where abundance lies, thyself thy foe, to thy own sweet self too cruel. What suicidal things we do to ourselves. We hurt ourselves, we cause sorrow to ourselves, and all for nothing. That's why he's saying, redeem yourself by yourself. We'll do one more verse before we end. 6.
बन्धुरात्मात्मनस्तस्य येनात्मैवात्मना जितः अनात्मनस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तेतात्मैव शत्रुवत्.
The self is an ally to one who has conquered the self. But to the unconquered one, the self is inimical like an adversary. Now you must have got completely confused with the word self, Atma. In the previous verse, in verse 5, The word self, if you noticed on the screen here or in the brochures that have been distributed to you, is written with a small s. So that means your inner personality, the body, mind and intellect. In this verse, self has been put with a capital S, which means Atman. So here he is saying, Atman, the facilitator of all your activities, that which enables you to function in life, is an ally, is your friend, Bandhu. When you have conquered yourself, when you have used your intellect to control the mind and the